There's a moment that arrives without ceremony. You're scrolling through a financial planning article and you see a number $3 million presented as the new benchmark for a comfortable retirement. And something shifts inside you. Not panic exactly, more like a quiet recalibration of what's possible, what's realistic, and whether the path you're on even points in that direction. You wonder if that number is for people who started tech companies or inherited wealth, or if regular people with regular jobs actually reach it. My name is Zik, and what I need to show you today isn't just whether $3 million is achievable. It's what separates the tiny fraction of people who get there from everyone else who spends decades contributing to retirement accounts and still ends up nowhere close. Here's what most people assume. They assume that $3 million is reserved for high earners. Doctors, lawyers, executives, people who make $200,000 a year or more for most of their careers. And yes, income helps. But here's the part that contradicts everything you've been told. There are people earning $70,000 a year who retire with $3 million, and people earning $150,000 who retire with $400,000. The difference isn't the paycheck, it's a threshold they cross early that fundamentally restructures how money moves through their lives. And most people never even know that threshold exists, let alone cross it. What you need to understand is this: retirement wealth isn't built linearly. It doesn't grow in proportion to how much you contribute or how long you work. It grows exponentially, but only after you've accumulated enough capital for compounding to overpower your contributions. Before that point, you're building. After that point, your money is building itself. And the distance between those two states is the difference between retiring with $3 million and retiring with $300,000. Same career length, same discipline, completely different outcomes, because one person crossed the inflection point and the other spent 40 years approaching it without ever breaking through. Let me give you a way to visualize this. Imagine you're pushing a massive stone wheel up an incline. For the first stretch, every ounce of effort goes into preventing it from rolling backward. You're sweating, straining, making slow progress, but once you crest the hill and the ground levels out, that same wheel starts rolling on its own. You're still pushing, but now your effort adds to existing momentum instead of fighting against resistance. The work feels different. The results feel different. That's what happens when you cross from contribution-dependent growth to compound-dependent growth. And the tragic part is, most people spend their entire careers pushing uphill, never realizing they were 10 feet from level ground. For most people, that inflection point happens somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 in invested retirement assets, not total wealth, not home equity. Invested capital that's compounding. Below that threshold, your contributions are still the primary driver of growth. Above it, compounding becomes the primary driver. And once you cross that line, reaching $3 million stops being a fantasy and starts being a mathematical inevitability, assuming you don't sabotage yourself. But here's the problem. Most people are 45 years old before they hit $200,000 in retirement savings, and by then, they've lost the most valuable accelerant time. Think about what's happening psychologically before you reach that point. You're 36 years old with $85,000 in your retirement account. You've been contributing for 14 years. You check your balance occasionally and it's growing, but it doesn't feel transformative yet. It's still abstract. It's still a number that's supposed to matter someday, but doesn't change anything about how you live today. So when your income increases, when you get that promotion or that raise, it's easy to let your lifestyle expand proportionally. You're still contributing the same percentage, so you feel responsible, but you're not accelerating. You're maintaining. And maintaining doesn't get you to $3 million. This is the trap. People mistake consistency for progress. They contribute 10% of their income for 30 years, and they think they're doing everything right. And by traditional standards, they are. But 10% of $70,000, growing at 8% annually for 30 years, gets you to $750,000, not $3 million. $750,000, which sounds substantial until you realize it produces $30,000 a year in retirement income at a 4% withdrawal rate. And if you were living on $70,000 during your working years, that's a catastrophic lifestyle downgrade. The people who reach $3 million aren't contributing 10%. They're contributing 25%, 30%, sometimes more during their peak earning years. But more importantly, they're doing it early. They're making sacrifices in their late 20s and early 30s that their peers aren't willing to make. They're living in smaller spaces. They're driving older cars. They're saying no to experiences that everyone around them is saying yes to. And they're doing this specifically to cross that $200,000 to $300,000 threshold as quickly as possible, because they understand that every year they delay crossing it is a year they lose on the back end, where compounding does the heavy lifting. Let me show you what this looks like with real numbers. Imagine you're 27 years old, earning $60,000 a year. You decide that for the next 12 years, retirement isn't going to be comfortable, it's going to be aggressive. You contribute 28% of your income, $1,680 a month. You live on the rest. You don't upgrade your apartment when you get raises. You don't finance a new car. You absorb income increases into your contribution rate instead of your lifestyle. It's uncomfortable. It feels like everyone else is moving forward while you're standing still. But here's what happens. By age 39, you've accumulated $320,000 in your retirement account. You've crossed the threshold. And now you can dial back. You drop to a 15% contribution rate, still substantial, but sustainable. But at this point, the compounding is doing real work. That $320,000 growing at 8% annually with continued contributions becomes $870,000 by age 50. By age 60, it's $1.9 million. And by 67, when you retire, you're looking at $3.1 million. You didn't earn a six-figure salary. You didn't get lucky with stock picks. You just crossed the threshold early enough that time and compounding did what they're designed to do. Now compare that to someone who contributes a comfortable 12% their entire career. Same starting age, same salary, same raises, same timeline. By 67, they have $1.2 million. Not nothing, but not $3 million. And the difference between these two people isn't 40 years of discipline, it's 12 years of discipline. That's the window. That's when the trajectory gets locked in. And most people miss it because they're not willing to live like a student when they're 30 years old and earning a professional salary. But what actually changes about you during those 12 years isn't just your account balance, it's your identity. Every month you choose the contribution over the convenience, you're proving something to yourself. You're building evidence that you can delay gratification, that you can hold a vision of your future self clearly enough to make decisions on their behalf, that you can withstand social pressure to keep up with peers, that you trust yourself to follow through on something that won't pay off for decades. And that self-trust, that internal proof, it becomes the foundation for every other major decision you make. You're not just financially different, you're psychologically different. The opportunities start to feel different too. Your colleague panics during a market downturn and stops contributing. You see the same downturn and increase your contributions because you recognize volatility as the price you pay for long-term returns. Your friend gets laid off and it's devastating. You get laid off and it's inconvenient, but you have options because your retirement account represents security that extends beyond your current employment. Same events, completely different experiences. One person is reacting from scarcity, the other is responding from abundance, and that distinction shapes everything. This abundance mindset changes your entire career posture. When you know you're building substantial retirement wealth, you stop making decisions from fear. You can leave toxic work environments. You can turn down roles that don't align with your growth. You can negotiate aggressively because the worst case scenario isn't catastrophic anymore. You're not bluffing. You have actual leverage. And people sense that. Employers sense it. Managers sense it. The energy you bring to conversations is fundamentally different when you're not desperate. And that energy attracts opportunities that never appear for people who are visibly afraid of losing what they have. Most people never access this posture because they never build the foundation that makes it possible. They spend their entire careers one or two paychecks away from financial stress. They stay in jobs that erode them because they can't afford the gap between roles. They accept disrespect because their mortgage depends on keeping this specific person happy. They watch opportunities pass because risk feels too expensive. And they tell themselves, this is maturity, this is being responsible. But what they don't realize is that they've confused stability with stagnation. They're not being responsible, they're being trapped. And the trap was built by 1,000 small decisions to prioritize comfort over momentum. Here's where people destroy everything they've built. They finally hit $500,000 in their retirement account. Maybe they're 52, and they start thinking about all the years they've spent being disciplined. They want to reward themselves. They want to feel wealthy, not just be wealthy on paper. So they buy a vacation home, or they upgrade to a luxury car, or they take the year-long sabbatical, and they justify it because they've earned it, because they have the assets, because you only live once. But here's what they don't calculate. That $200,000 they pulled out for the vacation home, if left invested for 15 more years at 8%, would have grown to $635,000. They traded over $500,000 in retirement security for a property they'll use 3 weeks a year. This is the self-sabotage that keeps people from reaching $3 million even when they're on track to get there. Not catastrophic mistakes, just late-stage lifestyle inflation that seems justified after decades of discipline. A withdrawal here, a loan against the account there, early retirement at 62 instead of 67 because they're tired of working. None of it feels reckless in isolation, but compounding is merciless. The final 5 to 10 years of accumulation are where the majority of growth happens, and people who tap out early, who treat their retirement account like a resource instead of a system, they forfeit the entire exponential tail that would have taken them from comfortable to genuinely wealthy. And here's the opportunity cost math that cuts deep. Let's say you're 55 with $1.4 million in retirement savings. You're considering retiring early at 60 instead of 65. Those 5 years feel long, you're tired, you've worked enough. But those 5 years, with continued contributions and compounding, would add another $800,000 to your account. You're not choosing between retiring at 60 or 65. You're choosing between retiring with $1.4 million or retiring with $2.2 million. That's the difference between 30 years of modest retirement and 30 years of genuine freedom. And most people make that choice without ever running the numbers. Think about that. Decades of discipline, decades of delayed gratification. And then at the finish line, when compounding is doing its most powerful work, people walk away because they're tired of working. They forfeit the very payoff they spent their whole lives building toward. And 5 years into retirement, when they're living on $40,000 a year instead of $80,000, when they're watching their balance slowly drain instead of grow, they realize they made a mistake. But by then, the opportunity is gone. You can't get those years back. You can't restart the compounding clock. So here's where we are. You now understand why almost no one has $3 million in retirement savings. It's not because math is impossible. It's because it requires a level of front-loaded sacrifice that most people aren't willing to make. It requires living below your means for a decade or more when everyone around you is upgrading. It requires crossing a threshold early that feels insignificant in the moment, but determines everything that comes after. And it requires protecting that growth at the end when every instinct is telling you to finally enjoy the fruits of your labor. But here's what matters. If you're 30 or 35 or even 45, you still have a path. Not the same path someone has at 25, but a path. You can still make different choices. You can still prioritize momentum over comfort. You can still become the person who reaches $3 million while the vast majority of people don't. 20 years from now, you'll look back at this moment and you'll either think, that's when I stopped kidding myself about what it actually takes. That's when I made the hard choice while it still mattered. Or you'll think, that's when I convinced myself $3 million wasn't realistic for someone like me. That I'd aim for something more reasonable and hope it was enough. Both thoughts feel justified today, but only one of them leads to the life you actually want at 70. Your future self is waiting. They're hoping you'll make the choice that changes everything. Not tomorrow, not next year, right now. It won't feel dramatic. It won't feel like a turning point, but it is. And now you know exactly what's at stake. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next video.